Alright everyone, welcome back to Archetype Architect. This will be the last episode for set 3, but if there's any other deck that you might want to see covered, feel free to comment it and I can definitely try getting it done. But a quick breakdown before we start. We'll do the ride line, then the support units, then we'll follow that up with some recommendations, and then we'll just wrap up with some final thoughts about the deck overall. But for today's episode, we're going to talk about the Bug Monk STOERIHAJA, who I think that's the right pronunciation because that's the way I've heard it said. But let's start with the ride line. We have the grade 0 banana, which boy howdy am I glad that these names are easy. Who really isn't needed for any effects, and it's just your normal go second draw card starter, but you know, you could play it. It doesn't change anything if you play something else, but it's cool, right? Following him we have Lamp, who again, boy howdy, are these names just easy. They will not be easy as we move along though. But he's a grade 1 for the deck, and he has 2 effects. The first triggered when he's wrote upon by Gamga, that lets you check top 7 for a STOERIHAJA or a Codex card and add it to your hand. Then his second effect triggers at the end of turn if you played a Codex, and it lets you retire him to get a STOERIHAJA from drop to hand. It's weird that it doesn't let you get a Codex, because I feel like that's this deck you're hopefully going to be playing 2 Codex a turn, as you'll see later, but there's not a lot of ways to get it back without in his support itself. But we'll talk about that later. Next up we have the grade 2 for the ride line, and that's Gamga, who when wrote upon by STOERIHAJA lets you Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for a Codex and add it to your hand. So you can guarantee yourself at least 1 Codex, but there is one more effect on Gamga that gives him plus 5k and lets you Soul Charge 1 when he's placed on rearguard if you played a Codex. I don't think you're going to be playing any more copies of the grade 1 or 2 in the main deck, since you can get the units from drop pretty easily with one of the Codex, which we'll talk about later. But lastly, we have the Bug Boss STOERIHAJA, who has 3 effects. The first will grant your front row plus 5k if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and you've played a Codex this turn. So a nice way to help your numbers kind of get a little bit bigger, and you're wanting to play a Codex every turn, so it's not something you're going to have to struggle to do, hopefully. Then his second effect is a once per turn when you play a normal order. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it lets you play an additional order, but you can only play Codexes. So that's the theme of this deck, is that it wants to play 2 Codex every turn, and they have to be both the 2 different ones that we have available. A lot of the deck benefits from you playing 2 Codexes, and that's where the last effect on STOERIHAJA comes in, and it says when he attacks you can counterblast 1 to resend a rearguard for each Codex you played this turn. So if you're going first, you can only play 1 Codex, so you get 4 attacks, but otherwise going second or after your first grade 3 turn going first, you get 5 attacks, you know. It's a pretty strong ability that just lets you have some crazy aggro. But now let's talk about support units. Starting with the Codexes we've been talking about, you can only play these if your Vanguard is STOERIHAJA, and you haven't played an order with the same name. So you have to play the 2 different ones. You can't just play 2 of the same one. But the first one is the Principles of Non-Self, that lets you return a grade 3 or less unit from drop, and it gets plus 5k. Then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets, when this unit restands, it gains a crit. The Codex being free makes these pretty good. Obviously you can't play them until you're at grade 3 because there are grade 3 orders, but they're still pretty good. You know, I think this is just a free resurrection order. We have quite a few effects like that, and the added bonus of being able to give a unit a crit is pretty good. But let's look at the second Codex, because we are going to be combining the 2, and the second Codex is the Principles of Unsatisfactoriness. What are these names? I feel like they've got they've got something to do with Hinduism, I believe, or is it Buddhism? I don't know. It's one of those that I have no real context on, but I'm assuming it's one of those 2. But the Principles of Unsatisfactoriness give your opponent your Vanguard loses 3k ability until the end of their turn. And if you played another Codex this turn, you can Soul Blast 2 to draw a card and give your opponent another ability that says all of your Vanguard lose a drive until the end of their turn as well. So this Codex is more about debuffing your opponent. You take away 3k from their Vanguard, you take away a drive from their Vanguard. That's kind of what they're trying to do. The first one will get you something, and the second one will take something away from your opponent. So it's pretty good. You want to be playing both of these. If you're playing, if you're going first, you're probably playing non-self just to get yourself something back. but I could see you playing Unsatisfactoriness to just make your opponent have a bit of a harder time swinging into you. If their Vanguard doesn't gain power itself, they're gonna have to call a booster, and you really can't prioritize on them calling rear guards, but it is a way to get rid of some of the cards in hand, essentially force them to call stuff. Now we do have some main deck units, not just orders, and the first one is the grade 3 Pompilidio. This is what I was saying, the names are gonna get hard. And it gains plus 5k for each codex you've played this turn. So it can become a 23k attacker. Then a second effect lets you retire him from the front row when your Vanguard is attacked by a rearguard to reduce that unit's power by its original power. So this is another defensive option that just kind of got shoehorned into an archetype that doesn't have anything to do with it. But hey, at least Bushiroad is trying to do some defensive options in decks. I wish they did something more about just making a defensive system similar to the Blitz deck that we talked about, almost a year ago, I think. But I don't think you're gonna be playing any of this guy in the deck. He's not really very good, especially when we put him in comparison to the next one we have, which is the grade 2 Vivartica. The one placed on rearguard lets you counterblast one to check top 7, and you can get a codex if you find it, and if you don't find one, you still get to draw a card. So it's pretty good. It's a CB draw a card or CB get a codex. He also has almost the same effect as what was that thing's name? Pompilidio. God, the names here are a little bit weirder. But he gains plus 5k for each codex you played. So it's a 20k attacker that lets you get some extra codexes or just draw a card. They're really good. Then the last grade 1 we have is Chlorophorus, that at the end of the battle it attacked or boosted, lets you put it into soul, check top 7, and get a codex to your hand. I really would have liked it if this card just got you a codex from drop, because you can whiff the top 7 and it doesn't give you anything if you whiff it how Vivartica does. So I don't know if you're going to be playing this guy. There's so much more order support that you can just play in STOERIHAJA, so it's going to be hard for you to make room for either Pompilidio or Chlorophorus. And if you were going to make room for either one, I think Chlorophorus gets a bit more leeway, because at least he creates soul and he lets you thin your deck in theory. But that's all for the support units. That's kind of everything that STOERIHAJA got in the way of the direct support. We do have some other cards from set 3 that we might mention, but let's move on to the recommendations. Only a couple cards here. The first one being the grade 2 Dual Nation card from Festival Booster, and that is Aspronia and Saphira, which is the Keter Sanctuary STOERIHAJA Dual Nation, and it says when it's placed on rearguard from hand other than during the battle phase, you can look at the top card of your deck and put it on the top or discard it, and then you can counterblast one and perform one of the following. Choose a normal order from your drop, put it into your hand, or choose a grade 2 or greater card from your drop, call it to rear. So it helps you get board, and it does help you stack, which is pretty good. If you don't see a trigger on top of the deck, just discard it away and you can just get it back with the second part of this effect. It's a really good card, but so are almost all of the Dual Nation cards, unfortunately. Then following that, we have the Energy Cycler. This deck doesn't use energy for anything, so this is perfect. Just use it to get yourself some extra card draw. His on call or on rearguard effect isn't too great, but it is available. You can get yourself an order card or a unit card with a different name from drop, so that's pretty good. You can get yourself some cards back, or you can just get yourself one of the codexes back. I think that's gonna be okay. Mostly he's here for the cycle effect. Then we have the grade 1 Alvina, who was part of this set but is not specific to STOERIHAJA. It's a very good card. If you're someone who plays STOERIHAJA, I would recommend picking up a set of these. It's got 2 abilities. The first one's when it's placed on rear from hand other than during the battle phase, you can Energy Blast 3 and perform one of the following. You choose an order card without Regalis piece from drop and you put it into your hand, or you choose a grade 1 or less unit from your drop and call it to rear. So again, this deck doesn't use energy for anything, so this essentially costs you nothing, and you can get a codex you need, or you can bring back some of your grade 1s that you might need. Hell, if you soul blasted the grade 1 from the ride line and you really need that effect, you can get it with Albina. Albina does have another effect that just gives it plus 2k if you have 4 more units, so it's a 10k booster. Already pretty good. Then for the last 2 options here, we have Burrow Mushrooms, because this card is just great at making soul and it gives you some free bodies. Who wouldn't want it, right? It's just 2 5k boosters on 2 of your attacks. You know, if you're restanding your units, this is perfect because you swing with them the first time, smaller numbers, and then you swing the second time, you get to boost them with the 2 tokens this gives you, and you're going to be using soul for your codex cards, so this is what it's here for. Then the last recommendation I have is Prize Trident. This card says when your other unit attacks, if it's the 5th battle of this turn, you can put it into your soul and countercharge 1, so you can boost with it on your 4th attack and then just put it into soul to countercharge 1. This deck can be a little CB heavy if you don't manage it correctly, so this is just a way to give yourself a bit more leeway in the room to use some of your effects. Maybe you want to use more Vivartica in a turn, so that's what this is perfect for. But with that, we end the recommendation section. Let's just move on to final thoughts. Overall, this is just another order deck in STOERIHAJA. We have plenty of those, and unfortunately I don't know how it stacks up against things like Zorga Divine, Zorga Nadir, or any of the other Zorgas, if I'm honest with you. I mean, so many decks in STOERIHAJA use orders, and I don't know if this deck is doing something that's so crazy that it can maybe cut above the rest. I think it's a decent deck. I think it's very cool. I love the idea of the codexes. I wish we had gotten maybe some more, maybe a 3rd option, so that you would be able to play multiple combinations, because in the current iteration you only have 2 combinations, right? Either play non-self and then unsatisfactoriness, or unsatisfactoriness and then non-self. But one of those combinations is the optimal way to go, and the other one is just gonna not feel as great. So there's not really a choice, you know. I think it having 5 attacks right off the gate is pretty good. I don't think you're going to be playing a lot of its main deck support besides the codexes and Vivartica. I think those are the only 2 cards you're going to be seeing in there. But we do have quite a bit, you know, of order support, because this is STOERIHAJA. So if you're someone who likes playing order decks, and maybe you don't want to play Zorga Nadir because maybe it's a little bit too expensive for you, then I would recommend STOERIHAJA. There's definitely ways to build this deck with where it's budget. Albina is a pretty expensive card, and I believe so is the Energy Cyclers and the Dual Nation card, but there's plenty of cards. I mean, you can play his cards, make a deck. You know, Burrow Mushrooms is not very expensive, and neither is Prize Trident, with one of them, I think actually both of them being a rare, one of them being a promo reprint at one point. So you can definitely build yourself a budget version of this deck and just test it out. And if you really think that you'll enjoy it, you can definitely splurge and get some of the more expensive stuff. You know, I think if you're someone who's already playing STOERIHAJA, you probably already have Energy Cyclers, and you probably already got yourself some Albinas. Just adding those 2 cards to the deck will make it so much better. But I think with that, we'll end the video here. This will be the last one of these videos for a while, unless someone recommends something else they want to see. And then tomorrow we'll be doing the support survey, which is where we just talk about some decks that got support in this set and just kind of go through their cards pretty quickly, so that people can see what the set brought for maybe older strategies. But I'll end the video there, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching.